7 years of silence. 7 years of being invisible in her own home. And the night the ghost returned, everyone expected Elara Whitcomb to crumble. Instead, she did something no one saw coming. She fought back. Welcome to a story of ice, pride, and survival in the brutal world of Regency England, where a duchess dismissed as insignificant becomes the only one standing between her home and destruction. If you want to see how a woman who was nothing becomes everything, stay until the end. And tell us in the comments what city you're watching from. Let's see how far this story travels. Now, let's begin. The first snow of November fell like ash over Greystone Estate. Elara Whitcomb stood at the tall windows of the library, watching the flakes drift down in silence. Her breath fogged the glass. Beyond the frost-edged panes, the moors stretched endlessly, gray, windswept, unforgiving, just like the man she'd married 7 years ago. She pressed her fingertips to the cold surface and let the chill seep into her skin. It was the only thing she felt anymore. Behind her, the fire crackled in the hearth, but it never reached her. Nothing did. Not warmth, not laughter, not even anger. She had learned over the long, silent years to live like a portrait on the wall, beautiful, still, and utterly lifeless. "Your Grace." Elara didn't turn. The housekeeper's voice was soft, hesitant. Mrs. Halloway had worked at Greystone for 30 years, and even she seemed afraid to disturb the silence too loudly. "Yes, Mrs. Halloway?" "The Duke has returned. He requests your presence in the drawing room." Elara's heart did not quicken. It had stopped doing that years ago. "Tell him I will be there shortly." The housekeeper curtsied and withdrew, her footsteps muffled by the thick rugs. Elara remained at the window a moment longer, staring at her own reflection in the darkening glass. Pale skin, dark hair pulled back too tightly, eyes that had once held hope, now empty as the winter sky. She looked like a ghost. Perhaps that was fitting. After all, she had been dead for years. The drawing room was warmer, but only in temperature. The walls were lined with portraits of Blackmore ancestors, men and women who stared down with expressions of cold judgment. Elara had always felt they were watching her, waiting for her to fail. Rowan Blackmore stood by the fire, his back to her. He was tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in dark riding clothes, still dusted with frost. His black hair was slightly disheveled from the wind, and his posture radiated the kind of authority that made grown men step aside. He didn't turn when she entered. He never did. "You sent for me," Elara said quietly. "I did." His voice was low, clipped, the voice of a man who had long ago stopped caring about pleasantries. Elara folded her hands in front of her and waited. This was their dance. He summoned. She appeared. He issued instructions. She obeyed. It had been this way since their wedding night, when he had informed her, coldly, clinically, that their marriage was a contract, nothing more. "We have guests arriving in 3 days," Rowan said, still not looking at her. "Lord and Lady Ashford, along with their daughter, the Markhams, Lord Pemberton and his sister, and—" He paused, and Elara felt the temperature in the room drop. "Lady Vivian Hargrave." Elara's breath caught. She had not heard that name spoken aloud in 7 years. Rowan finally turned to face her. His eyes were the color of winter storms, gray, cold, unreadable. His jaw was set, his expression carved from stone. He was handsome in the way a cliff face was handsome, brutal, unyielding, dangerous. "I trust that will not be a problem," he said flatly. Elara met his gaze and held it. She had learned, over the years, never to look away first. "Of course not, Your Grace." His eyes narrowed slightly, as if trying to detect a lie. But Elara had become very good at hiding. "Good. See that the household is prepared. I expect everything to be appropriate." "It will be." He studied her a moment longer, then turned back to the fire, dismissing her without another word. Elara curtsied to his back and left the room. Her hands were shaking. "Ushapopot." Lady Vivian Hargrave. The name echoed in Elara's mind as she walked the long, empty corridors back to her chambers. Her footsteps were the only sound in the vast, silent house. Vivian. The woman Rowan had loved. The woman he had been engaged to before everything fell apart. The woman who had shattered him so completely that he had never recovered. and now she was coming here. Elara closed the door to her bedroom and leaned against it, her breath coming faster. She pressed her hands to her face, forcing herself to stay calm. It didn't matter. It couldn't matter. Vivian was part of the past. Elara was, well, she was nothing. A placeholder, a name on a contract, a body to occupy the space beside Rowan at formal dinners, silent and decorative. She had always known that. But knowing it and facing it were two different things. Elara moved to the vanity and sat down, staring at her reflection in the candlelight. She looked tired, worn, like a piece of fabric that had been washed too many times, its color faded, its edges frayed. She thought of the night Rowan had proposed. It hadn't been romantic. There had been no courtship, no stolen glances, no whispered promises. Her father had been desperate, debts he couldn't pay, scandals he couldn't bury. The Whitcomb name was crumbling, and Rowan Blackmore had offered a way out. A marriage. An alliance. Cold, transactional, efficient. Elara had been 20 years old, naive enough to believe she could change him. Foolish enough to think love could grow where there was only ice. She had been wrong. Rowan had made it clear from the beginning. He didn't want her heart. He didn't want her thoughts, her dreams, her laughter. He wanted a Duchess who could manage his household, host his gatherings, and stay out of his way. And she had done exactly that, for 7 years. But now Vivian was returning, and Elara felt something stir inside her that she hadn't felt in a long time. Fear. Not fear of losing Rowan, she had never truly had him, but fear of what Vivian's return would reveal. Fear of being exposed as the fraud she felt herself to be. The Duchess who had no power, no influence, no voice. The Duchess who was nothing. The next morning dawned gray and bitter. Elara woke before sunrise, as she always did, and dressed in silence. Her maid, young Sarah, moved efficiently around the room, lacing her corset, pinning her hair, adjusting the heavy fabric of her morning gown. "Will there be anything else, Your Grace?" Sarah asked, her voice timid. "No, thank you, Sarah." The girl curtsied and left, and Elara was alone again. She descended the grand staircase to the breakfast room, where the long table was already set with silver and porcelain. Rowan was there, reading the Morning Post, a cup of black coffee at his elbow. He didn't look up when she entered. Elara took her seat at the far end of the table, the seat that had been hers for 7 years. The distance between them felt like miles. A footman served her tea and toast. She ate mechanically, her eyes on the window where the snow continued to fall. "The roads will be difficult," Rowan said suddenly. Elara looked up. He was still staring at his letters, his expression unreadable. "Yes," she said, "the Ashfords may be delayed. I will ensure rooms are kept ready regardless." He nodded once, a curt acknowledgement, and returned to his reading. Silence descended again. Elara wanted to ask him, wanted to demand answers. Why was Vivian coming? Why now? What did he feel when he heard her name again after all these years? But she didn't, because asking would reveal that she cared, and caring would make her vulnerable, and vulnerability was the one thing she could not afford. So she drank her tea and said nothing, and the silence stretched on, as it always did. The next 3 days passed in a blur of preparations. Elara threw herself into the work with an intensity that surprised even Mrs. Halloway. She inspected every room personally, ensuring that the linens were crisp, the fires were laid, the flowers were fresh. She met with the cook to review the menus, adjusting them 3 times until they were perfect. She supervised the polishing of the silver, the cleaning of the chandeliers, the arrangement of the furniture. "Your Grace, you're working yourself into exhaustion," Mrs. Halloway said gently on the second day, finding Elara in the guest wing at nearly midnight, rearranging pillows. "I'm fine. You haven't eaten since breakfast." "I'm not hungry." Mrs. Halloway sighed, her weathered face creased with concern. "You haven't been yourself since the Duke announced the guests." Elara didn't respond. She smoothed an already perfect coverlet and moved to check the fireplace. "It's her, isn't it?" Mrs. Halloway said quietly. "Lady Vivian." Elara's hand stilled. The housekeeper stepped closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "I've been here long enough to remember what she did to him, what she did to this house." Elara turned slowly. "What happened?" Mrs. Halloway. The older woman hesitated, glancing toward the door as if afraid someone might overhear. Then she sighed and folded her hands. She was engaged to the Duke, 8 years ago. It was the match of the season. Everyone said they were perfect together. Both beautiful, both wealthy, both from powerful families. The Duke was different then. Younger, less hardened. He smiled more, laughed even. Elara felt something twist in her chest. She couldn't imagine Rowan laughing. "What happened?" she asked again. Mrs. Halloway's expression darkened. A week before the wedding, Lady Vivian ran off with another man, a French comte, handsome and charming and utterly penniless. She left a letter for the Duke saying she couldn't marry him, that she didn't love him, that she wanted passion, not duty. Elara felt the air leave her lungs. The scandal was enormous, Mrs. Halloway continued. The Duke became a laughingstock. People whispered that he wasn't man enough to keep his own bride, that he was too cold, too proud, too empty. It broke something in him. He withdrew from society, came back here to Greystone, and became the man you know now. Elara's mind raced. And Vivienne? The French comte abandoned her within a year, left her destitute in Paris. She married an elderly baron for his money, and when he died, she inherited everything. Now she's a wealthy widow, free to do as she pleases. Mrs. Halloway's eyes met Elara's, and apparently what pleases her is returning here. Elara felt cold. Why would Rowan allow it? I don't know, Your Grace, but I do know this. That woman is poison. She destroyed him once. And I fear she's come back to finish the job. Before Elara could respond, a footman appeared at the door. Your Grace, the first carriage has been sighted on the road. Elara's stomach dropped. Thank you. I'll be down shortly. She took a breath, smoothed her skirts, and forced her expression into calm composure. Whatever was coming, she would face it with dignity. She had no other choice. Lord and Lady Ashford arrived first, stepping out of their carriage with complaints about the cold and the roads. Their daughter Cecilia trailed behind them, pretty and vapid, already scanning the entrance hall for eligible men. Elara greeted them warmly, her smile practiced and perfect. Lord Ashford, Lady Ashford, how wonderful to see you. I trust the journey wasn't too arduous? Dreadful roads, Lord Ashford grumbled, handing his coat to a footman. Absolutely dreadful. I've had rooms prepared with extra fires. Please warm yourselves in the drawing room. Tea will be served shortly. Lady Ashford patted Elara's hand condescendingly. You're such a dear, organizing all of this. It must be exhausting for you. Elara's smile didn't waver. Not at all. It's my pleasure. The Ashfords swept inside and Elara turned back to the entrance just as the second carriage arrived. The Markhams emerged, a cheerful couple in their 50s who filled the space with laughter and chatter. They greeted Elara with genuine warmth, and she found herself relaxing slightly in their presence. Duchess, you look lovely as always, Mrs. Markham said, squeezing Elara's hands. And Greystone is magnificent in the snow, like something from a painting. Thank you, Mrs. Markham. You're very kind. Lord Pemberton and his sister arrived next, polite and reserved, offering quiet greetings before retreating to the warmth of the drawing room. And then, Elara's breath caught as the final carriage rolled up the drive. It was black and elegant, pulled by 4 matching horses, the kind of carriage that announced wealth and status before its occupant even appeared. Rowan emerged from the house and stood beside Elara at the top of the steps. She felt the tension radiating from him, a coiled energy that made the air feel electric. The carriage door opened. A gloved hand appeared first, pale and elegant, then a flash of crimson fabric, and finally she stepped out. Lady Vivian Hargrave. She was breathtaking, tall and statuesque, with golden hair piled high in an elaborate style that must have taken hours to arrange. Her gown was the color of fresh blood, bold, daring, scandalous. It clung to her figure in a way that was just acceptable enough for society, but provocative enough to turn heads. Her face was flawless. High cheekbones, full lips, eyes the color of emeralds that glittered with intelligence and calculation. She looked like a woman who knew exactly how beautiful she was, and exactly how to use it. Her gaze swept over Greystone Estate, and a slow smile curved her lips. Then her eyes landed on Rowan. "Rowan," she said, her voice like honey and smoke. "It's been far too long." Rowan's jaw tightened. his hands clasped behind his back, clenched into fists. Vivian. His voice was flat, emotionless, but Elara heard the tension beneath it. Vivian glided up the steps, her movements graceful and deliberate. She ignored Elara completely, her attention fixed on Rowan. "You look well," she purred, stopping directly in front of him. "The years have been kind to you." Rowan said nothing. Vivian extended her hand, palm down, the gesture of a queen expecting homage. For a moment, Rowan didn't move. Then, stiffly, he took her hand and pressed his lips to her gloved knuckles. Elara felt something crack inside her chest. Vivian's smile widened, triumphant. Then, finally, she turned to Elara. Her gaze swept over her, assessing, dismissing. "And you must be the Duchess," she said, her tone sweet but laced with condescension. "How quaint." Elara met her gaze evenly. "Lady Vivian, welcome to Greystone." Vivian's smile sharpened. "Oh, I know Greystone very well. I used to think of it as home." The words hung in the air like a blade. Elara didn't flinch. She curtsied, smooth and perfect, and gestured toward the entrance. "Please, come inside. You must be tired from your journey." Vivian swept past her without another glance, her perfume lingering in the air, expensive, cloying, oppressive. Rowan followed, his expression dark and unreadable. Elara stood alone on the steps, the cold wind biting at her skin. And for the first time in 7 years, she felt something sharper than numbness. She felt rage. Pure, burning rage. This woman, this beautiful, cruel woman, had destroyed Rowan once, had humiliated him, broken him, left him to rebuild himself from the shattered pieces. And now she had returned, bold and confident, as if she had every right to walk back into his life. As if Elara didn't exist, Elara's hands clenched into fists at her sides. No. She had been invisible for 7 years. She had been quiet, obedient, insignificant. But she was done. If Vivian thought she could waltz back in and reclaim what she'd abandoned, she was wrong. Elara straightened her spine, lifted her chin, and walked back into the house. The war had begun, and she would not lose. Thus, dinner that night was a carefully orchestrated performance. The dining room gleamed with candlelight, the long mahogany table laden with roasted pheasant, glazed root vegetables, delicate pastries, and crystal goblets filled with deep red wine. The guests chatted and laughed, their voices filling the cavernous space with warmth. But at the head of the table, Rowan sat in silence, his gaze fixed on his plate. Vivian sat to his right, in the seat that should have been Elara's. Elara sat farther down the table, between Lord Pemberton and Lady Ashford, smiling politely and nodding at the appropriate moments. But her attention was locked on Vivian. The woman was a master. She leaned close to Rowan, her laughter bright and musical. She touched his arm, just lightly, just enough. She whispered in his ear, her lips close enough to brush his skin. She reminded him, and everyone else at the table, that she had once been the woman he wanted. And Rowan said nothing. He didn't pull away. He didn't rebuke her. He simply sat there, his expression carved from ice, enduring her attention like a man enduring torture. But Elara saw the tension in his shoulders, the tightness in his jaw, the way his knuckles whitened around his wine glass. He wasn't indifferent. He was fighting something. "Tell me, Your Grace," Vivian said suddenly, her voice cutting through the chatter like a knife. The table fell quiet. Vivian was looking at Elara now, her smile sharp and predatory. "How do you find married life? It must be quite different from what you imagined." Every eye turned to Elara. She set down her fork carefully, her movements deliberate. "It is exactly as I expected, Lady Vivian." "Oh?" Vivian tilted her head, her expression innocent. "And what did you expect?" Elara met her gaze without blinking. "A partnership built on respect and duty." Vivian's smile didn't waver, but something cold flickered in her eyes. "How practical." "Practicality has its virtues." "Does it?" Vivian leaned forward slightly, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that still carried to every ear. "I always thought marriage should be built on passion, on fire, on something that makes you feel alive." Elara felt the weight of the silence pressing down on her. She could sense the other guests watching, waiting to see if she would crumble. She smiled, calm and composed. Passion burns out, Lady Vivian. Duty endures. For the first time, Vivian's smile faltered. Just for a second. But Elara saw it. Rowan's gaze snapped to Elara, something unreadable flickering in his storm-gray eyes. The silence stretched, thick and tense. Then Lord Ashford cleared his throat loudly and launched into a rambling story about a hunting trip, and the moment passed. But Elara felt it, the shift, the crack in Vivian's perfect armor. And she realized something that sent a chill down her spine. This wasn't just about Rowan. This was personal. Vivian wasn't here to rekindle an old romance. She was here to destroy. After dinner, the guests retired to the drawing room for cards and brandy. The fire roared in the hearth, casting dancing shadows on the walls. Conversation flowed easily, lubricated by wine and the warmth of the room. Elara excused herself early, claiming fatigue, and slipped away into the shadowed hallways. She needed air, space, silence. She wandered through the house, her footsteps echoing on the marble floors, until she found herself in the conservatory, a glass-walled room at the back of the estate, filled with winter plants and bathed in cold moonlight. She sank onto a stone bench and let her head fall into her hands. 7 years. 7 years of being invisible, of being nothing. And now Vivian had returned, beautiful and bold and utterly confident, and Elara felt like she was disappearing entirely. "Running away, Duchess?" Elara's head snapped up. Vivian stood in the doorway, framed by darkness, her crimson gown a slash of color against the shadows. Elara rose slowly, forcing herself to remain calm. "I needed air." "Of course you did." Vivian stepped inside, her heels clicking sharply on the stone floor. "It must be exhausting pretending to belong here." Elara's pulse quickened, but she kept her voice steady. "I do belong here." Vivian laughed, a bright, cruel sound that echoed off the glass walls. "Do you? Really?" She circled Elara slowly, like a predator stalking prey. "You're a placeholder, darling, a warm body to fill a role. A name on a contract. You know it. I know it." She stopped directly in front of Elara, her emerald eyes gleaming. "And Rowan knows it best of all." Elara's hands clenched into fists at her sides, but she forced her expression to remain neutral. "If you have something to say, say it." Vivian's smile widened. "Very well. I made a mistake 7 years ago. I left Rowan when I shouldn't have. I was young and foolish and thought I wanted adventure, passion, freedom." She waved a hand dismissively. "But I've learned since then. I've grown. And now—" She leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Now I'm going to take back what's mine." Elara's breath caught. "Rowan was always meant to be mine," Vivian continued, her voice soft but venomous. "We were perfect together. Everyone said so. And we would have been happy, truly happy, if I hadn't made that one foolish mistake." "You humiliated him," Elara said quietly. Vivian shrugged. "Men recover. And besides, absence makes the heart grow fonder, doesn't it? I've seen the way he looks at me, the way he tenses when I'm near. He still feels something for me, something real." "You're delusional." Vivian's expression hardened. "Am I? Tell me, Duchess. When was the last time your husband looked at you the way he looks at me? When was the last time he touched you, spoke to you with anything other than cold civility?" Each word was a knife, precisely aimed. Elara said nothing, because there was nothing to say. Vivian's smile returned, satisfied and cruel. "You can't fight me, Elara. You don't have the strength. You've spent 7 years being quiet, obedient, invisible. You're nothing, a shadow, a ghost." She stepped even closer, her voice barely a whisper. "And when I'm done, you'll disappear completely." For a long moment they stared at each other. Elara could feel her heart pounding, her hands trembling. But then, slowly, something shifted inside her. A spark, a flame, a burning, furious determination. She had spent 7 years being quiet, being nothing. But she was done. Elara smiled, a small, cold smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You're right," she said softly. "I've been invisible. I've been quiet. But do you know what that's given me, Lady Vivian?" Vivian's smile faltered. "Time," Elara said. "Time to watch, to listen, To learn. You think I'm weak because I don't shout, but silence is not weakness, it's strategy. Vivian's expression darkened. Elara stepped closer, her voice dropping to a whisper that was somehow more menacing than any shout. You want Rowan? Fine. But you'll have to go through me first, and I promise you... Her smile sharpened. I am not as easy to break as you think. For a long moment they stared at each other, the air between them crackling with tension. Then Vivian laughed again, but this time it sounded forced, brittle. We'll see, Duchess. We'll see. She swept out of the conservatory, her crimson skirt swirling behind her. Elara stood alone in the moonlight, her hands still shaking. But this time it wasn't fear, it was something else, something she hadn't felt in years. It was power. And for the first time since her wedding night, Elara Whitcomb decided she was done being invisible. She was done being nothing. If Vivian wanted a war, she would get one. And Elara would fight with everything she had, because she had spent 7 years in the cold, frozen, and forgotten. But ice could be sharp, ice could cut. And Elara was done melting. She was ready to freeze the world. Elara didn't sleep that night. She lay in her bed, staring at the canopy above her, replaying Vivian's words over and over in her mind. The woman's confidence had been absolute, her cruelty surgical. But beneath the venom, Elara had detected something else: desperation. Vivian needed this, needed Rowan, needed to prove she could reclaim what she'd thrown away, which meant she was vulnerable, and vulnerability could be exploited. As dawn broke gray and cold over the moors, Elara rose and dressed with care. She chose a gown of deep forest green, elegant but understated, and had Sarah arrange her hair in a style that was both refined and severe. She studied herself in the mirror, noting the dark circles beneath her eyes, the sharp angles of her face. She looked like a woman ready for battle. Good. She descended the stairs just as the household was beginning to stir. The servants moved quietly through the corridors, lighting fires, preparing breakfast, their footsteps muffled on the thick carpets. Elara found Mrs. Halloway in the housekeeper's sitting room, reviewing the day's menus. Your Grace, the older woman said, rising quickly, I didn't expect you so early. I need information, Mrs. Halloway. The housekeeper's eyebrows rose. What kind of information? Elara closed the door behind her and stepped closer, lowering her voice. About Lady Vivian. You said she married a baron after the French Comte abandoned her. Tell me everything you know about that marriage. Mrs. Halloway studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Sit, Your Grace. This may take some time. They sat together by the small fire, and Mrs. Halloway began to speak. Baron Hargrave was 73 when he married Lady Vivienne. She was 25. It was widely known that he was in declining health. His family expected him to die within the year. Lady Vivienne played the role of devoted wife beautifully, but anyone with eyes could see it was a performance. She was after his fortune, nothing more. And did she get it? Every penny. The Baron had no children from his previous marriages, and he was so besotted with her that he left her everything: the estate, the investments, the title. His nephews tried to contest the will, claiming she'd manipulated him, but they had no proof. Lady Vivienne walked away with one of the largest fortunes in England. Elara's mind raced. What happened to the nephews? They were ruined, lost everything trying to fight the will in court. Last I heard, one had fled to America to escape his creditors, and the other drank himself to death. A cold suspicion began to form in Elara's mind. Mrs. Halloway, how exactly did Baron Hargrave die? The housekeeper's expression darkened. The official cause was heart failure, but there were whispers, servants' talk, you know. They said he'd been perfectly healthy one day and dead the next. No warning, no gradual decline, just gone. Whispers of what? Mrs. Halloway leaned closer, her voice dropping to barely a whisper. Poison, Your Grace. Nothing proven, mind you. Nothing that could be brought before a magistrate. But the servants were convinced. They said Lady Vivienne had been very attentive in his final weeks, always bringing him tea, always insisting on preparing his meals herself. And then one morning, he simply didn't wake up. Elara felt ice settle in her veins. And no one investigated? The family physician was a friend of hers. He signed the death certificate without question. By the time the nephews thought to demand an autopsy, the Baron had already been buried. Elara sat back, her mind whirling. Vivian wasn't just manipulative, she was dangerous, potentially deadly. Thank you, Mrs. Halloway. This is helpful. The housekeeper's eyes were sharp. What are you planning, Your Grace? Elara met her gaze steadily. I'm planning to protect my home. Awesome. Breakfast was a tense affair. The guests gathered in the morning room, helping themselves to eggs, toast, kippers, and fruit from the sideboard. Vivian swept in late, looking radiant in a gown of pale blue silk, her golden hair cascading over her shoulders in artful curls. Good morning, everyone, she said brightly, her smile dazzling. The men rose automatically. Lord Ashford actually bowed. Even Mr. Markham, normally sensible, looked slightly dazed. Vivian's gaze found Rowan, who stood by the window with a cup of coffee, his expression unreadable. Rowan, darling, you look like you didn't sleep a wink. Are you feeling well? Rowan's jaw tightened. I'm fine. You should take better care of yourself. She glided closer, her voice softening to something intimate. I worry about you, you know. You work too hard. Always have. Elara watched from her seat at the table, her expression serene, her hands folded calmly in her lap. But inside, she was calculating. Vivian was playing to an audience. Every gesture, every word was designed to remind everyone in the room that she knew Rowan intimately, that she had history with him, that Elara was the outsider. Lady Ashford leaned toward Elara, her voice a stage whisper. They do make a striking pair, don't they? I remember when they were engaged, everyone said it was the match of the century. Elara smiled blandly. How fortunate that the century had only just begun. There was still time for better matches. Lady Ashford blinked, uncertain whether she'd been insulted. Across the room, Vivian had maneuvered herself next to Rowan, standing close enough that her shoulder brushed his arm. I was thinking, she said, her voice carrying clearly, that we should all go riding today. The snow has stopped, and the moors are so beautiful in winter. Don't you think, Rowan? We used to ride together all the time, remember? Rowan's expression remained granite. I have estate business to attend to. Surely it can wait. You always did work too much. She placed a hand on his arm, her touch light but possessive. Come, for old time's sake. Elara saw Rowan's shoulders tense, saw the muscle in his jaw twitch, and she made a decision. What a lovely idea, Lady Vivian, Elara said, rising gracefully from her seat. I'll join you. Every head in the room turned. Vivian's smile froze. You ride, Duchess? Of course. Elara's smile was perfectly polite. I ride every morning when the weather permits. I'd be delighted to show you the estate. There have been some changes since you were last here. The emphasis on last here was subtle but unmistakable. Vivian's eyes narrowed slightly, but her smile remained fixed. How charming. I'm sure you're adequate in the saddle. More than adequate, I assure you. Rowan's gaze flicked to Elara, something unreadable passing across his face. It's settled then, Vivian said, her voice bright but edged. A riding party. How delightful. An hour later, they gathered in the courtyard. The grooms had saddled 4 horses, a massive black stallion for Rowan, a spirited chestnut mare for Vivian, a gray gelding for Lord Pemberton, who had decided to join them, and a sleek bay mare for Elara. Vivian emerged from the house in a stunning riding habit of midnight blue velvet, cut to emphasize her figure. Her hair was pulled back under a jaunty hat, and she looked like something from a painting. She glanced at Elara, clearly expecting to find her in something dowdy and practical. Instead, Elara appeared in a habit of deep burgundy wool, perfectly tailored, her hair in a neat braid down her back. She looked elegant, competent, and completely at ease. Vivian's smile tightened. The groom helped Elara mount, and she settled into the saddle with practiced ease, gathering the reins confidently. Rowan swung onto his stallion in one fluid motion, his face still unreadable. Shall we? He said shortly. They rode out across the frozen grounds, the horses' hooves crunching on the snow-covered gravel. The moors stretched before them, bleak and beautiful, the sky a pale gray vault overhead. Vivian maneuvered her horse next to Rowan's, chatting animatedly about past rides, past hunts, past memories that deliberately excluded Elara. Do you remember the time we raced to the old ruins? She laughed. You were so certain you'd win, and I beat you by half a length. I remember. Rowan said flatly. You were furious, but also impressed, I think. You always did like a challenge. Elara rode slightly behind them, beside Lord Pemberton, who was quietly enjoying the scenery. But she was listening to every word. Vivian was building a narrative, creating a picture of a shared past, a deep connection, a bond that Elara could never match. And Rowan wasn't stopping her. They reached a rise overlooking the valley, and Vivian reined in her horse, her expression wistful. I'd forgotten how beautiful it is here. How peaceful. She turned to Rowan, her voice softening. I was a fool to leave. Rowan said nothing. I know I hurt you, Vivian continued, her eyes glistening with what might have been tears. I was young and stupid and selfish, but I've thought about you every day since, wondered what might have been if I'd stayed. Elara felt her hands tighten on the reins. The past is past, Vivian, Rowan said, his voice hard. Is it? She leaned closer. Because it doesn't feel past to me, it feels present. Before Rowan could respond, Elara urged her horse forward. Lady Vivian, if you're interested in the estate, perhaps you'd like to see the new irrigation system the Duke implemented last year. It's quite revolutionary. He's transformed the tenant farms, increased yields by nearly 40%. Vivian blinked, clearly thrown by the interruption. How technical? The Duke is very forward-thinking, Elara continued smoothly. He's invested heavily in modern agricultural methods. The tenants are thriving as a result. It's quite impressive what he's accomplished. For the first time, a flicker of genuine emotion crossed Rowan's face. Surprise. You know about the irrigation system? He asked. Elara met his gaze. I read all your estate reports, Your Grace. I make it a point to understand how Greystone operates. Rowan stared at her, something shifting in his expression. Vivian's smile had vanished entirely. How industrious of you. Knowledge is power, Lady Vivian. Surely you understand that. The two women locked eyes. Shall we ride on? Lord Pemberton said cheerfully, oblivious to the tension. I'd love to see these ruins Lady Vivian mentioned. They continued riding, but the dynamic had shifted. Elara had inserted herself into the conversation, refusing to be relegated to the background, and Vivian was not pleased. They returned to the house an hour later, wind-chilled and flushed from the cold. As they dismounted, Vivian stumbled slightly, and Rowan automatically reached out to steady her. Oh, she gasped, her hand clutching his arm. Thank you, Rowan. How clumsy of me. She didn't let go. Elara watched, her expression neutral, as Vivian leaned into Rowan, her body pressed against his. I think I may have twisted my ankle, Vivian said, her voice pained. Would you help me inside? Rowan's expression was stone. Of course. He offered his arm, and Vivian took it, limping dramatically as they walked toward the house. Elara stood by her horse, watching them go. Lord Pemberton appeared beside her. That woman is trouble, he said quietly. Elara glanced at him, surprised. The older man smiled wryly. I'm not blind, Your Grace. I see what she's doing, and I think you're handling it admirably. Am I? You're still standing. That's more than most women could manage in your position. He tipped his hat. If you'll excuse me, I need to warm up by the fire. Elara remained in the courtyard as the others filed inside. A groom approached to take her horse, and she handed over the reins absently. Her mind was racing. Vivian was escalating, becoming bolder, more physical, and Rowan was allowing it. Not encouraging it, perhaps, but not stopping it either. Elara needed to change tactics. Waiting, watching, being patient, it wasn't enough. She needed to act. That evening, Elara requested a private meeting with Rowan in his study. He looked surprised when she appeared at his door. Elara, is something wrong? It was the first time in months he'd used her name. May I speak with you? He hesitated, then nodded and gestured to a chair. Of course. Elara entered the study, a room she'd been in only a handful of times in 7 years. It was masculine and austere. Dark wood paneling, leather furniture, shelves lined with books and ledgers. The scent of tobacco and old paper hung in the air. Rowan moved behind his desk but didn't sit. He stood, arms crossed, his expression guarded. What is it? Elara clasped her hands in front of her, choosing her words carefully. I want to discuss Lady Vivienne. Rowan's expression hardened. There's nothing to discuss. I disagree. His eyes narrowed. This is not your concern. She's a guest in our home. That makes it my concern. Our home, Rowan repeated, his voice flat. Is that what you call it? The words stung, but Elara didn't flinch. Yes, our home. Regardless of the circumstances of our marriage, I am your wife, and I have a right to know what her intentions are. Her intentions are her own business. Are they? Because from where I'm standing, her intentions seem quite clear. She wants you back. Rowan's jaw clenched. What I do, what she does, is not your concern. Elara felt anger flare in her chest. Then what am I, Rowan? What is my role here, if not to care about the stability of this household, about your reputation, about what? He cut her off, his voice sharp. About me? Don't pretend you care, Elara. We both know this marriage is a business arrangement, nothing more. A business arrangement you're about to jeopardize. Rowan's eyes flashed. How dare you? How dare I what? Speak the truth? Vivienne humiliated you once. She left you standing at the altar, made you a laughingstock, broke you so completely you've been a ghost for 7 years. And now she's back, and you're letting her… Enough! The word cracked like a whip. Rowan's hands were clenched into fists, his body rigid with barely controlled fury. You know nothing about what happened between Vivienne and me. Nothing. You have no right to speak of it. Elara stood her ground. Then tell me, help me understand why you're allowing this woman to walk all over you and me in our own home. I don't owe you explanations. Perhaps not, but you owe yourself better than this. The words hung in the air between them. Rowan stared at her, his expression a storm of conflicting emotions, anger, pain, confusion. Get out, he said finally, his voice low and dangerous. Elara didn't move. Rowan, I said get out! For a moment, Elara considered pushing further, but she saw the raw pain in his eyes, the vulnerability beneath the rage, and she realized she'd gone as far as she could, for now. She curtsied stiffly. As you wish, Your Grace. She left the study, closing the door quietly behind her. In the corridor, she pressed her back against the wall and took a shaking breath. That hadn't gone the way she'd hoped. But it had revealed something important. Rowan was still in love with Vivienne, or at least he was still haunted by her, and that made everything infinitely more dangerous. The next day, Vivienne's ankle had miraculously healed. She appeared at breakfast bright and cheerful, announcing that she felt well enough to join the ladies for tea in the garden room. Elara organized the gathering with meticulous care, arranging for the finest tea service, the most delicate pastries, fresh flowers despite the winter cold. The ladies assembled in the glass-walled garden room, sunlight streaming through the windows, warming the space. Lady Ashford, her daughter Cecilia, Mrs. Markham, Lord Pemberton's sister, Miss Pemberton, and Vivienne all settled into comfortable chairs arranged in a circle. Elara poured tea with practiced grace, playing the perfect hostess. You have such a lovely home, Your Grace, Mrs. Markham said warmly. Everything is so beautifully maintained. Thank you. I take great pride in Greystone. As you should, Vivienne said, her smile sharp. After all, it's the only thing you have, isn't it? The room went quiet. Elara set down the teapot carefully. I'm not sure I understand your meaning, Lady Vivienne. Oh, I just mean that you came from such modest circumstances. Your family had nothing, if I recall correctly. No fortune, no connections. Marrying the Duke must have felt like winning the lottery. Lady Ashford gasped softly. Elara's hands remained steady. My family may not have had wealth, but we had integrity. I consider that far more valuable. Vivienne laughed. How quaint. Integrity doesn't pay bills, darling. Perhaps not, but it does allow one to sleep at night. Vivienne's smile froze. Miss Pemberton, bless her, jumped in. I think both wealth and character are important. One shouldn't have to choose. Exactly, Elara said smoothly, which is why I'm so fortunate to have married a man of both substance and honor. Vivienne's eyes glittered dangerously. Honor? Yes. Rowan always was honorable, perhaps too much so. A woman wants passion, not just duty. A woman wants different things at different stages of her life, Elara countered. In youth, perhaps passion seems paramount, but as we mature, we come to value stability, loyalty, trust. How dreadfully boring. How wonderfully secure. The two women stared at each other across the tea table. Mrs. Markham cleared her throat. Perhaps we should discuss the ball tomorrow night. I'm so looking forward to it. Vivian leaned back in her chair, her expression calculating. A ball? How delightful. Tell me, Duchess, will you be dancing with your husband? Or has he already promised all his dances to someone else? Elara felt the barb hit home, but kept her expression serene. The Duke rarely dances, but I'm certain the other gentlemen will be more than happy to partner with the ladies. Oh, Rowan dances, Vivian said softly. When properly motivated. The implication was clear. Elara set down her teacup with deliberate care. Lady Vivian, I wonder if we might speak privately for a moment. Vivian's eyebrows rose. How intriguing, of course. Elara rose and gestured toward the adjoining room, a small sitting area used for private conversations. The other ladies exchanged nervous glances as Elara and Vivian withdrew. Once they were alone, Elara closed the door and turned to face her enemy. Vivian's expression was triumphant. Finally grown a spine, have we? I need to understand something, Elara said quietly. Why are you really here? Vivian's smile widened. I told you, I want Rowan back. But why? You left him. You humiliated him. You chose someone else. And now years later you've decided you want him again? That doesn't make sense. Doesn't it? I made a mistake. I'm correcting it. At what cost? You have wealth now. Independence. You could have any man in England. Why Rowan? For a moment, something flickered in Vivian's eyes, something that looked almost like desperation. Then her mask slipped back into place. Because he's mine, she said simply. He always was, and I don't like sharing. Elara shook her head slowly. You're lying. There's something else, something you're not telling me. Vivian laughed. You're smarter than you look, I'll give you that. But not smart enough. She stepped closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. Here's the truth, Duchess. I will have Rowan back. And when I do, I'll make sure you're cast aside like the nobody you are. You'll lose everything. This house, your title, your pathetic little life of pretending to matter. And there's nothing you can do to stop me. Elara felt ice settle in her veins. We'll see about that. Vivian's eyes narrowed. Is that a threat? It's a promise. I will not be pushed aside. I will not disappear quietly. If you want to destroy me, Lady Vivian, you're going to have to fight for it. Oh, darling, Vivian purred. I already am. She swept out of the room, leaving Elara alone. Elara stood there for a long moment, her mind racing. Then she made a decision. If Vivian wanted war, she would have it. But Elara was done playing defense. It was time to attack. That night, Elara didn't sleep. Instead, she sat at her writing desk and composed 3 letters. The first was to her brother, a barrister in London. She asked him to investigate Lady Vivian's finances, her late husband's death, and any scandals that might have been hushed up. The second was to a friend from her youth, now married to a prominent physician. She asked about poisons, specifically ones that could mimic heart failure. The third was to the family solicitor, requesting a full accounting of the marriage settlement and her legal rights should the marriage be dissolved. She sealed the letters and hid them in her desk. Then she pulled out a piece of blank paper and began to plan. If Vivian was playing a game, Elara needed to understand the rules. And more importantly, she needed to find Vivian's weakness. Everyone had one. She just needed to find it. And when she did, she would strike without mercy. Because Elara had learned something important over the past few days. She wasn't just fighting for her marriage. She was fighting for her survival. And she would do whatever it took to win. The morning of the ball dawned cold and bright, the winter sun casting long shadows across the frozen grounds of Greystone Estate. Elara stood at her bedroom window, watching the servants scurry across the courtyard below, carrying crates of champagne and elaborate floral arrangements. The entire household had been transformed into a hive of controlled chaos, musicians rehearsing in the ballroom, footmen polishing every surface until it gleamed, maids arranging hundreds of candles that would transform the estate into something magical. But Elara felt no excitement, only the cold weight of determination. She had spent the night finalizing her plan, and now, as dawn broke, she knew exactly what she needed to do. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. "Come in." Mrs. Halloway entered, her expression troubled. "Your Grace, I have news." Elara turned from the window. "What is it?" The housekeeper glanced toward the door, then lowered her voice. "One of the maids overheard Lady Vivian speaking with someone last night. A man. He arrived after midnight, stayed less than an hour, and left before dawn." Elara's pulse quickened. "Did anyone see him?" The stable boy caught a glimpse. He said the man was well-dressed, young, and spoke with a French accent. French? Elara's mind raced. Did they hear what was discussed? Only fragments. Something about the arrangement and payment upon completion. And Mrs. Halloway hesitated. The maid said Lady Vivian gave him something, a small package wrapped in cloth. Did she see what was inside? No, Your Grace, but she said Lady Vivian was very careful with it, handled it like it was fragile. Or dangerous. Elara felt ice settle in her stomach. Thank you, Mrs. Halloway. Keep this between us. The housekeeper nodded and withdrew. Elara returned to the window, her thoughts churning. Vivian was planning something that required outside help, something secret, and Elara would bet everything she owned that it was connected to tonight's ball. She needed to act. Now. But she found Rowan in the stables, inspecting one of the new colts. He looked up as she approached, surprise flickering across his face. "Elara, what are you doing out here?" "I need to speak with you. It's urgent." His expression closed off. "If this is about Vivian again, it is, but not in the way you think." She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "Rowan, I believe she's planning something dangerous." His eyes narrowed. "What are you talking about?" Elara told him about the midnight visitor, the mysterious package, the whispered conversation. Rowan listened, his expression growing darker with each word. "That doesn't prove anything," he said finally. "Perhaps not. But combined with everything else, her sudden return, her desperation to win you back, the timing of it all, it's suspicious. Vivian is manipulative, not dangerous. Are you certain?" Elara met his gaze steadily. "What do you really know about her life since she left you? About Baron Hargrave's death? About how she acquired her fortune?" Something flickered in Rowan's eyes. Doubt. "You're reaching," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Am I? Then answer me this. Why would a wealthy widow with independence and status risk everything to come back here? What does she gain by reconciling with you that she doesn't already have?" Rowan was silent. "Unless," Elara continued quietly, "she needs something from you. Something only you can provide." "Like what?" "I don't know yet, but I intend to find out." She paused. "I need you to trust me, Rowan. Just this once." He stared at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he nodded slowly. "What do you need me to do?" Relief flooded through her. "Tonight at the ball, I need you to keep Vivian occupied, distracted. Can you do that?" "While you do what?" "While I search her rooms." Rowan's eyes widened. "Elara, that's necessary. If I'm wrong, no harm done. But if I'm right..." She met his gaze. "If I'm right, we need to know what she's planning before it's too late." Rowan studied her, and for the first time in 7 years she saw something in his expression that wasn't coldness or indifference. It was respect. "All right," he said quietly. "I'll keep her occupied. But be careful." "I will." As she turned to leave, his voice stopped her. "Elara." She looked back. "Why are you doing this? Why do you care?" She could have given him a dozen different answers. Could have talked about duty, about protecting the household, about maintaining appearances. Instead, she told him the truth. "Because this is my home too. And I'm done watching from the sidelines." Something shifted in his expression. Understanding, perhaps. Or recognition. Then he nodded once and turned back to the colt. But as Elara walked back toward the house, she felt something warm kindle in her chest. For the first time in 7 years, they were on the same side. The ball began at 8 o'clock. The ballroom blazed with candlelight, hundreds of flames reflecting off polished marble and gilded mirrors. The orchestra played from their elevated platform, the music floating through the air like something ethereal. Guests arrived in a steady stream, wealthy landowners, minor nobility, influential merchants, all dressed in their finest silks and jewels. Elara stood at the entrance beside Rowan, greeting each arrival with practiced grace. She wore a gown of midnight blue silk, the bodice embroidered with silver thread that caught the light like stars. Her hair was piled high, secured with diamond pins that had belonged to Rowan's mother. She looked like a duchess. She felt like a spy. Vivian arrived fashionably late, making an entrance that drew every eye in the room. Her gown was scarlet, bold, daring, scandalous. It clung to her figure like a second skin, the neckline cut low enough to make the older ladies gasp. Her golden hair was loose, cascading down her back in waves. She looked like sin incarnate. "Rowan," she purred, gliding toward them, "you look devastatingly handsome tonight." Rowan's expression was stone. "Vivian," she turned to Elara, her smile sharp, "and Duchess, how quaint you look." Elara smiled serenely. "Thank you, Lady Vivian. Simplicity has its virtues." "Does it? I've always believed in making a statement." "Yes, I can see that, though one must be careful. Too bold a statement can sometimes be mistaken for desperation." Vivian's smile froze. Before she could respond, the orchestra struck up a waltz, and couples began moving onto the dance floor. "Rowan," Vivian said, extending her hand, "dance with me, like old times." Rowan hesitated, his gaze flicking to Elara. She gave him the slightest nod. He took Vivian's hand and led her onto the floor. Elara watched them go, her heart pounding. This was it, her chance. She waited until they were fully engaged in the dance, Vivian's attention completely focused on Rowan, whispering something in his ear that made him stiffen. Then Elara slipped away from the ballroom, moving quickly through the corridors toward the guest wing. Vivian's rooms were in the east wing, overlooking the gardens. Elara approached the door cautiously, glancing over her shoulder to ensure she was alone. She tried the handle. Locked. She pulled a hairpin from her elaborate coiffure and bent it carefully, working it into the lock. It was a skill her brother had taught her years ago, laughing at the impropriety of it. She'd never imagined she'd actually use it. The lock clicked. Elara slipped inside and closed the door behind her. The room was immaculate, too immaculate. Everything perfectly arranged, nothing out of place. It had the sterile quality of a space occupied by someone who didn't trust servants not to snoop. Elara moved quickly, methodically searching the wardrobe, the dresser, the writing desk. She found expensive gowns, elaborate jewelry, perfumes that cost more than most people earned in a year. But nothing suspicious, nothing that proved anything. She was about to give up when her hand brushed something hard beneath the mattress. She knelt and reached underneath, her fingers closing around a small wooden box. She pulled it out and opened it. Inside were letters, dozens of them. Elara's hands trembled as she unfolded the first one. It was written in French, the handwriting elegant and masculine. Her French was passable, learned during her brief time at finishing school. She read slowly, translating as she went. "My dearest Vivian, I grow impatient. You promised me the Blackmore fortune, and yet I see no progress. The Baron's money is nearly gone. Your extravagance has seen to that. We need the Duke's wealth, or we are ruined. Do not fail me again." The signature was illegible, but it didn't matter. Elara's mind raced. Vivian wasn't just trying to win Rowan back for love or pride. She needed his money. She kept reading, letter after letter, each one more damning than the last. They spoke of debts, of desperate gambling losses, of creditors closing in. The French lover, whoever he was, had bankrupted them both, and Vivian had returned to Greystone as a last resort. But it was the final letter that made Elara's blood run cold. "If he will not marry you willingly, you know what must be done. The poison is prepared. One way or another, you will be the Duchess of Blackmore, and once you are, the fortune will be ours." Elara's hand shook so badly she nearly dropped the letter. Poison. Vivian was planning to murder Rowan, and marry him in name only, controlling his fortune as his widow, just as she'd done with Baron Hargrave. Elara's mind raced. She needed to get these letters to Rowan, needed to expose Vivian before... The door opened behind her. Elara spun around, her heart stopping. Vivian stood in the doorway, her expression cold and furious. "Well, well," she said softly. "The little mouse has teeth after all." Elara's mind raced, calculating her options. The letters were still clutched in her hand. The door was blocked, and Vivian was moving toward her with the predatory grace of a hunting cat. "How did you—" Elara started. "Know you were here? Please. I've been watching you all evening. You're not as subtle as you think." Vivian closed the door behind her and turned the lock with a decisive click. "The question is, what am I going to do about this little intrusion?" Elara straightened her spine, forcing herself to remain calm. "These letters prove everything. Your debts. Your plan to poison Rowan. The magistrate will—" Vivian laughed, a bright, cruel sound. "The magistrate? Oh, darling, you really are naive, aren't you?" She moved closer, her eyes glittering. "Do you honestly think anyone will believe you? A nobody who married up, desperate to hold on to her title, making wild accusations against a respected widow? These letters are evidence." "Are they? Letters in French, which you've conveniently translated? From a mysterious lover no one can verify exists?" Vivian shook her head. "It's your word against mine, Duchess, and I'm very good at playing the victim." Elara's grip tightened on the letters. "Rowan will believe me, will he?" Vivian tilted her head. "The man who hasn't touched you in 7 years? Who barely speaks to you? Who has made it abundantly clear that you mean nothing to him?" She laughed again. "He'll think you're jealous, desperate, making things up to discredit me. Then I'll go to the authorities myself. You'll do nothing." Vivian's voice turned to ice. "Because if you try, I'll destroy you. I'll tell everyone about your father's debts, your family's scandals, every sordid detail I've uncovered about your pathetic little past. I'll make sure you're ruined so thoroughly that no one will ever speak your name again." Elara felt rage burn through her fear. "I'm not afraid of you." "No?" Vivian stepped closer until they were inches apart. "Then you're a fool, because I have killed before, and I will kill again if necessary." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. "Baron Hargrave," Elara whispered. Vivian smiled. "Among others, it's easier than you'd think if you're careful. A bit of poison in the wine, a push down the stairs, an unfortunate riding accident." Her eyes gleamed. "So many ways for people to die tragically." Elara's heart hammered against her ribs. She was alone, locked in a room with a woman who had just confessed to murder, and no one knew where she was. "What do you want?" Elara asked, forcing her voice to remain steady. "I want you gone. Out of this house. Out of Rowan's life. Tonight." Vivian reached into her bodice and pulled out a small glass vial filled with clear liquid. "This is arsenic, enough to kill you within hours. You have 2 choices. Drink it willingly, and I'll make it look like you took your own life. Poor lonely Duchess, so miserable in her loveless marriage. Or refuse, and I'll force it down your throat and stage an accident." Elara stared at the vial, her mind racing. She could scream, but the ballroom was too far away, the music too loud. No one would hear. She could fight. But Vivian was taller, stronger, and clearly willing to do whatever it took. She could try to run, but the door was locked, and Vivian stood between her and the only exit. "Well?" Vivian prompted. "What will it be?" Elara looked at the letters still clutched in her hand. Evidence. Proof. And suddenly she knew what she had to do. "All right," she said quietly. "I'll drink it." Vivian's eyebrows rose. "Really? Just like that?" "You're right. I have no power here. No influence. No way to fight you." Elara met her gaze. "If I'm going to die anyway, I'd rather it be quick." Vivian studied her suspiciously. "You're giving up? The woman who stood up to me in the conservatory? Who searched my room looking for evidence? What choice do I have?" Elara's voice broke convincingly. "I can't win against you. I never could." Vivian's smile returned, triumphant. "Finally, some sense." She held out the vial. "Drink it all, and make it quick." Elara took the vial with trembling hands. She uncorked it slowly, staring at the clear liquid inside. Then, in one swift motion, she hurled it directly at Vivian's face. Vivian shrieked, stumbling backward, her hands flying to her eyes as the arsenic splashed across her skin. Elara didn't wait. She ran for the door, fumbling with the lock. Behind her, Vivian screamed in rage and pain. "You bitch! I'll kill you! I'll—" The lock turned. Elara yanked the door open and ran. She flew down the corridor, the letters clutched to her chest, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst. Behind her, she heard Vivian's footsteps, heavy and furious. "Guards!" Vivian screamed. "Stop her! The Duchess has gone mad!" Elara ran faster, her slippers sliding on the polished floors, her elaborate gown tangling around her legs. She could hear Vivian behind her, closer now, her breathing ragged with fury. Elara burst through a servant's entrance and down a narrow staircase, taking the steps two at a time. At the bottom, she collided with someone solid. Strong hands caught her shoulders, steadying her. "Elara?" She looked up into Rowan's face. "Rowan," she gasped. "Vivian, she tried to—" "I know." His voice was hard. "I saw her leave the ballroom. I followed." Behind them, Vivian appeared at the top of the stairs, her face flushed, her eyes wild. "Rowan," she cried. "Thank heaven you're here. The Duchess attacked me. She's lost her mind. She tried to poison me." Rowan's hands tightened on Elara's shoulders. Then he gently moved her behind him, placing himself between her and Vivian. "That's interesting," he said coldly, "since Elara doesn't have access to poison. But you do." Vivian froze. "I had my men search your carriage while you were dancing," Rowan continued. "They found quite a collection of interesting substances. Arsenic, laudanum, hemlock." His eyes were like winter storms. "The same poisons that killed Baron Hargrave." Vivian's face went pale. You can't prove—" "I also found these." Rowan held up a stack of letters, different from the ones Elara held, but clearly similar. "Correspondence between you and your French lover. Very detailed, very incriminating. Those are private. They're evidence of fraud, of murder, of conspiracy." Rowan's voice was deadly quiet. "I also have testimony from Baron Hargrave's servants. Sealed statements they were afraid to give while you had power over them. But when I contacted them yesterday and offered protection, they were very forthcoming." Yesterday. Elara's mind reeled. Rowan had been investigating Vivian. While Elara had thought he was falling back under her spell, he'd been gathering evidence. Vivian seemed to realize she was trapped. Her expression shifted from shock to calculation to desperation. "Rowan, please," she said, her voice breaking. "I did it for us. Everything I did was for us, so we could be together." "You killed an innocent man," Rowan said flatly. "You tried to kill my wife. There is no us." "But I love you. You love money. You love power. You have never loved anything but yourself." Vivian's face crumpled. Then, in an instant, the mask fell away completely. Her expression turned cold, vicious, the beautiful facade cracking to reveal something ugly beneath. "You think you've won?" she hissed. "You think you can expose me, destroy me, and walk away unscathed?" She laughed, the sound brittle and sharp. "I'll drag you down with me. I'll tell everyone about your precious Duchess, about her father's crimes, her family's shame. I'll make sure you're both ruined." "You're welcome to try," Rowan said. "From prison." He gestured, and two of his men appeared from the shadows, large, grim-faced men who moved toward Vivian with purpose. She backed up the stairs, her eyes wild. "No, no, you can't do this. Watch me." The men reached for her. And then Vivian did something none of them expected. She ran, not down the stairs toward them, but up, higher into the house, toward the east tower. "Stop her!" Rowan shouted. They chased her through the corridors, up twisting staircases, into the older parts of the estate. Vivian moved with desperate speed, her scarlet gown flashing like blood through the shadows. She burst through a door onto the tower balcony, a stone platform that overlooked the frozen grounds far below. She spun to face them, her back against the low balustrade, her chest heaving. "Stay back!" she screamed. Rowan stopped at the doorway, Elara beside him, his men flanking them. "It's over, Vivian," Rowan said. "There's nowhere to go." "I know." Her smile was terrible. "But if I can't have you, no one will." She reached into her bodice and pulled out another vial, larger than the first. "Vivian, don't—" Elara started, but Vivian uncorked it and raised it to her lips. "See you in hell, Duchess," she said, and drank. For a moment, nothing happened. Then Vivian's eyes went wide. She gasped, clutching at her throat. The vial fell from her fingers and shattered on the stone. She stumbled backward, her body convulsing, and then she fell, over the balustrade into the darkness, her scream echoing through the night. There was a sickening thud from far below. Then silence. Elara stood frozen, her mind unable to process what she'd just witnessed. Rowan moved to the balustrade and looked down. His face was grim. "She's dead," he said quietly. Elara felt her knees buckle. Rowan caught her, his arms strong and steady around her. "It's over," he murmured. "She's gone. You're safe." Elara looked up at him, and for the first time she saw real emotion in his eyes. Not ice, not distance, but something warm, something alive. "Thank you," she whispered, "for believing me." His hand came up to cup her face, his thumb brushing her cheek. "I should have believed you from the beginning." Below them, they could hear shouts as the household began to realize something had happened. The ball would have to be canceled. The authorities would have to be summoned. There would be questions, investigations, scandal. But for this moment, standing in the cold tower under the winter stars, Elara felt something she hadn't felt in 7 years. Hope. And when Rowan pulled her close, holding her against him like she was something precious, something worth protecting, she felt the ice around her heart finally begin to crack. The ghost was gone. And for the first time, there was room for something real. The authorities arrived at dawn. Elara watched from the library window as the magistrate's carriage rolled up the frozen drive, followed by 2 constables on horseback. The winter sun was just breaking over the moors, casting long shadows across the snow-covered grounds, where Vivian's broken body had lain throughout the night, covered with a white sheet that now bore a dusting of fresh snow. Behind her, the fire crackled softly. Rowan stood near the hearth, his face drawn and tired. Neither of them had slept. "They're here," Elara said quietly. Rowan nodded and moved to stand beside her. His hand found hers, their fingers intertwining naturally, as if they'd been doing it for years instead of hours. It was strange how quickly everything had changed, how one terrible night could shatter 7 years of ice and distance. "Are you ready?" he asked. "Yes." But she wasn't sure that was true. The magistrate was a stern-faced man named Sir Edmund Hartley, with iron-gray hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. He questioned them separately first, Elara in the library, Rowan in his study. The servants were interviewed next, then the remaining guests who had stayed through the night, too shocked to leave. Elara told the truth. All of it. The midnight visitor, the letters, the confrontation in Vivian's room, the confession, the poison. She handed over the letters she'd found, her hand steady despite the exhaustion pulling at her bones. Sir Edmund listened without interruption, his expression unreadable. When she finished, he studied her for a long moment. "That's quite a story, Your Grace." "It's the truth. The truth according to you. Lady Vivian, unfortunately, cannot provide her version of events." Elara felt a chill run down her spine. "Are you suggesting I'm lying?" "I'm suggesting that what you've described is extraordinary. A wealthy widow, respected in society, attempting murder? It strains credulity." "Then examine the evidence. The poison found in her carriage, the letters, the testimony from Baron Hargrave's servants." Sir Edmund's eyes narrowed. "You seem very well informed about the Duke's investigation." "My husband shared the details with me. We're partners, Sir Edmund, in everything." It was the first time she'd said it aloud. The first time she'd claimed that partnership as real, as true. And it felt right. Sir Edmund made a non-committal sound and dismissed her. She returned to the library to find Mrs. Halloway waiting with tea. The housekeeper's face was pale with worry. "How did it go, Your Grace?" "I'm not certain. He's skeptical." "Of course he is. Men like that always doubt women." Mrs. Halloway poured the tea with steady hands. "But the evidence is solid. The Duke made sure of that." Elara accepted the cup gratefully, wrapping her cold hands around the warm porcelain. "What are people saying? The guests?" Mrs. Halloway's expression darkened. "Some believe you. Others," she hesitated. "Others think you drove Lady Vivian to her death out of jealousy. That you fabricated the evidence to justify your actions. Of course they did. A nobody duchess, threatened by a beautiful rival, resorting to desperate measures. It was exactly the narrative Vivian had predicted would destroy Elara. Except now Vivian was dead, and the narrative was spinning beyond anyone's control. "What does Lord Pemberton say?" Elara asked. The older man had been kind to her. She hoped his voice might carry weight. "He believes you completely. He's been quite vocal about it, actually. Says Lady Vivian was trouble from the moment she arrived, and that you handled yourself with remarkable composure." Mrs. Halloway smiled slightly. "His sister agrees, as do the Markhams." "And the Ashfords?" Mrs. Halloway's smile faded. "Lady Ashford is calling you a murderer." Elara closed her eyes. "Of course she is." The door opened and Rowan entered, followed by Sir Edmund. Both men looked grim. "Your Grace," Sir Edmund said formally, "I've completed my preliminary investigation." Elara set down her teacup and rose, her heart pounding. "And?" "The evidence supports your account. The poison in Lady Vivian's carriage, the letters, the testimony from multiple sources, all of it corroborates your story." He paused. "However, there will need to be a formal inquest. Lady Vivian's death, regardless of the circumstances, occurred on your property during an altercation with you. The law requires a full examination." "I understand. You'll be required to testify publicly, as will the Duke and your staff. The details will become public knowledge. There will be scandal." "There's already scandal," Elara said quietly. "At least this way the truth will be known." Sir Edmund studied her with something that might have been respect. "Very well. The inquest will be held in 3 days' time. Until then, I suggest you prepare yourselves. This will not be pleasant." After he left, Rowan pulled Elara into his arms. She went willingly, pressing her face against his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart. "We'll get through this," he murmured into her hair. "Together." "Will we? Even if they believe the evidence, they'll still judge me, still whisper, still say I'm not worthy of this place." Rowan pulled back slightly, tilting her chin up so she had to meet his eyes. "You are the strongest person I've ever known," he said fiercely. "You survived 7 years of my coldness, my neglect, my cowardice. You faced a murder alone and won. You saved both our lives." His thumb brushed her cheek. "Anyone who says you're not worthy of Greystone is a fool." Elara felt tears prick her eyes. "You didn't neglect me. You were protecting yourself." "From what?" "From being hurt again. From trusting again." She smiled sadly. "I understand that now. Vivian broke something in you, and I was just there. A reminder of everything you'd lost." Rowan's expression crumpled. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Elara. I should have—" "Don't." She pressed her fingers to his lips. "We can't change the past. We can only move forward." He caught her hand and kissed her palm, the gesture so tender it made her chest ache. "Then let's move forward," he said. No more ice, no more distance, just us." "Just us," she echoed. And for the first time in 7 years, she believed it might actually be possible. The next 3 days were a gauntlet of preparation and anxiety. Elara met with Rowan's solicitor, a sharp-eyed man named Mr. Blackwood, who reviewed her testimony with meticulous care. He prepared her for the kinds of questions she would face, the attempts to discredit her, the insinuations about her character and motives. "They'll try to paint you as jealous, unstable, desperate," Mr. Blackwood warned. "You must remain calm, composed, answer only what is asked, never volunteer additional information, and above all, do not let them provoke you into anger." "I understand." "Lady Ashford has already given a statement to the magistrate. She claims you were unnaturally obsessed with Lady Vivian, that you watched her constantly, that you made inappropriate accusations." Elara's hands clenched in her lap. "That's not true. Truth is irrelevant if the jury believes the lie. You must be prepared to counter these claims with grace and dignity." Rowan, sitting beside her, spoke up. "Lady Ashford is a bitter woman who resents Elara's position. Her testimony should be dismissed as prejudiced." "Perhaps, but she's well-connected and well-respected. Her words will carry weight." Mr. Blackwood looked at Elara seriously. "Your best defense is your character. The servants will testify that you were always kind, fair, level-headed. Lord Pemberton and the Markhams will speak to your composure under pressure, and the physical evidence will support your version of events. Will it be enough? It will have to be. That night, Elara couldn't sleep. She wandered the dark corridors of Greystone, her mind churning with worry. She found herself in the conservatory where she'd first confronted Vivian, staring out at the moonlit gardens. Couldn't sleep either? She turned to find Rowan standing in the doorway, his shirt unbuttoned at the collar, his feet bare. Too much to think about, she admitted. He crossed to her and took her hand, leading her to the stone bench where they sat together in the silvery darkness. "Talk to me," he said quietly. "Tell me what you're afraid of." Elara was silent for a moment, gathering her thoughts. "I'm afraid that even if we win at the inquest, even if they rule it was self-defense or justified or whatever legal term they use, I'm afraid that society will never accept me, that I'll always be the Duchess who killed Lady Vivian Hargrave, the nobody who got rid of her rival. They'll be wrong, but they'll believe it anyway." She looked at him. "And I'm afraid that eventually you'll start to believe it too, that you'll look at me and see not your wife, but the woman who destroyed your past." Rowan was quiet for a long moment. Then he spoke, his voice rough with emotion. "I need to tell you something. About Vivian. About why I let her destroy me." Elara waited, not pushing, just being present. "When she left me, it wasn't just the humiliation or the scandal. It was the fact that I had believed her, believed she loved me, believed we had something real." He stared at his hands. "I pride myself on reading people, on seeing through deception. But she fooled me completely. And when she ran off with that Comte, laughing at me behind her hand, I felt like the greatest fool in England. You weren't a fool. You were in love. I was weak. I let emotion cloud my judgment, and I swore I would never make that mistake again." He turned to face her. "So when I married you, I built walls. I told myself it was protection, wisdom, strength, but it was just cowardice. Rowan, let me finish." He took her hands in his. "For 7 years, you've been right here, patient, strong, never demanding, never complaining, running this household, managing the staff, dealing with difficult guests and cruel gossip. And I never saw you. I looked right through you because I was too afraid to actually look at you." Tears slipped down Elara's cheeks. "But these past few days, I've seen you," Rowan continued, his voice fierce. "I've seen your courage, your intelligence, your loyalty. You risked your life to protect me from a woman I was too blind to see for what she was. And when I look at you now, I don't see my past. I see my future." Elara's breath caught. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness," Rowan said. "I know I've wasted 7 years we can never get back. But if you'll give me a chance, just one chance, I swear I will spend the rest of my life proving that you are the only woman I want. The only woman I need." Elara couldn't speak. Her throat was too tight, her heart too full. So instead, she kissed him. And Rowan kissed her back like a man drowning, pulling her close, his hands tangling in her hair, 7 years of longing and regret and desperate hope pouring into that single moment. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Rowan rested his forehead against hers. "I love you," he whispered. "I think I've loved you for longer than I knew. I was just too much of a coward to admit it." Elara smiled through her tears. "I love you too. Even when I hated you, I loved you." He laughed softly, the sound rusty but genuine. "That makes no sense. Welcome to marriage." They sat together in the moonlight, holding each other, and for the first time since their wedding night, Elara felt truly married, not bound by contract, but united by choice. The inquest was held in the great hall of the nearby market town, a cavernous space packed with curious onlookers, journalists, and members of the gentry who had nothing better to do than witness a scandal firsthand. Elara sat in the front row, Rowan beside her, Mr. Blackwood on her other side. She wore a gown of somber gray, her hair pulled back severely, her expression calm despite the knots in her stomach. The coroner, a portly man named Dr. Whitmore, called the proceedings to order and began systematically presenting the evidence. Vivian's body had been examined. The cause of death was determined to be arsenic poisoning, followed by fatal injuries from the fall. The timeline matched Elara's account precisely. The poison found in Vivian's carriage was examined and confirmed to be identical to that which killed her. Letters were read aloud, the damning correspondence between Vivian and her French lover, detailing their debts, their schemes, their plans to acquire the Blackmore fortune. The servants from Baron Hargrave's estate testified via written statements. They described Vivian's suspicious behavior before the Baron's death, her insistence on preparing his food personally, his sudden decline and death. Lord Pemberton took the stand and described Vivian's behavior at Greystone, her manipulation, her inappropriate advances toward the Duke, her hostility toward Elara. The Duchess handled herself with remarkable grace, Lord Pemberton said firmly. She was never jealous or vindictive. If anything, she was too patient, too willing to extend hospitality to a woman who clearly meant her harm. Mrs. Markham testified next, echoing Lord Pemberton's assessment. The Duchess is one of the kindest women I've ever met. The idea that she would harm anyone is preposterous. But then Lady Ashford took the stand, her expression pinched and disapproving. The Duchess was obsessed with Lady Vivian, she said, her voice dripping with disdain. She watched her constantly, made inappropriate accusations. I believe she saw Lady Vivian as a threat and took drastic action to eliminate her. Did you witness the Duchess make threats against Lady Vivian, Dr. Whitmore asked? Not directly, but her behavior was highly suspicious. That's not evidence, Lady Ashford. That's speculation. Lady Ashford's face reddened. I'm simply stating what I observed. And what you observed was a Duchess protecting her household from a dangerous intruder, Lord Pemberton called from his seat. Dr. Whitmore rapped his gavel. Order! Lord Pemberton, you will refrain from outbursts. But the damage was done. The crowd murmured, some nodding in agreement with Lord Pemberton, others shaking their heads. Finally, Elara was called to testify. She rose and walked to the witness stand, her legs steady, her head high. She could feel every eye in the room on her, judging, assessing, waiting for her to crack. She didn't. Dr. Whitmore asked her to recount the events of that night. Elara did so, her voice clear and calm, leaving out no detail. She described finding the letters, Vivian's confrontation, the confession, the poison, the chase. And when Lady Vivian threatened you with the vial, what did you do? I threw it at her and ran. You didn't try to reason with her, to call for help? There was no time. She had just confessed to murder and was attempting to kill me. My only option was to escape. Some might say you provoked her by searching her rooms. Elara met his gaze steadily. I suspected she was a danger to my husband. I was trying to protect him. I found evidence that proved I was correct. And Lady Vivian's death was her own choice. She chose to drink poison rather than face justice. I tried to stop her. Did you? I told her not to drink it, but she did anyway. Dr. Whitmore studied her for a long moment. You show remarkable composure, Your Grace, for someone who witnessed such a terrible event. I'm not composed, I'm traumatized, but I refuse to let that trauma destroy me. I did what I had to do to survive, and I would do it again. A murmur ran through the crowd. Dr. Whitmore dismissed her, and Rowan was called to the stand. He corroborated every detail of Elara's testimony. He described his investigation into Vivian's past, the evidence he'd uncovered, his growing suspicion that she was dangerous. Why didn't you confront her directly? Dr. Whitmore asked. Because I wanted solid evidence before making accusations. Lady Vivian was skilled at manipulation. Without proof, she would have turned the situation against us. And you believe your wife's life was truly in danger? Rowan's eyes blazed. I know it was. Vivian Hargrave was a murderer. She killed Baron Hargrave. She planned to kill me. And she would have killed my wife if Elara hadn't been brave enough to fight back. The room erupted in whispers. Doctor. Whitmore called for order, then dismissed Rowan. The jury, 12 men of property and standing, retired to deliberate. The wait was excruciating. Elara sat beside Rowan, their hands clasped tightly, as minutes stretched into an hour. Finally, the jury returned. Dr. Whitmore called for their verdict. The foreman, a gray-haired landowner, stood. We find that Lady Vivian Hargrave died by her own hand, having consumed poison in a desperate attempt to escape justice for multiple crimes including murder, conspiracy, and attempted murder. We find no fault with Her Grace the Duchess of Blackmore, whose actions were justified and necessary in defense of her own life. The room exploded in noise, some cheering, some protesting, everyone talking at once. Elara felt her knees go weak with relief. Rowan pulled her into his arms, holding her tight as the chaos swirled around them. "It's over," he murmured. "You're safe. It's over." But even as she clung to him, Elara knew it wasn't truly over. The legal battle might be won, but the social battle was just beginning. They returned to Greystone that evening to find the household in celebration. The servants had heard the verdict and prepared a feast in Elara's honor. Mrs. Halloway greeted her with tears in her eyes. "I knew they'd see the truth, Your Grace. I knew it." Lord Pemberton and the Markhams stayed for dinner, raising their glasses in toast after toast. "To the Duchess," Lord Pemberton declared, "the bravest woman in England." "To justice," Mrs. Markham added, "and to truth prevailing over malice." Even some of the other guests who had been skeptical approached Elara with apologies. "I misjudged you, Your Grace," one elderly baron said gruffly. "Thought you were just a pretty face. Turns out you've got steel in your spine." Elara accepted their apologies with grace, but she could see the ones who didn't approach, the ones who still whispered behind their hands, still looked at her with suspicion or disdain. Lady Ashford left without a word, her daughter in tow, her face tight with disapproval. Let them judge, Elara thought. Let them whisper. She had survived worse than gossip. That night, after the guests had retired and the household had quieted, Elara and Rowan stood together in the library, watching the fire. "What happens now?" Elara asked. Rowan turned to her, a small smile playing at his lips. "Now we actually have a marriage, a real one. After 7 years of pretending? After 7 years of being fools?" He pulled her close. "I want to court you properly, Elara. I want to learn everything about you. Your favorite books, your secret dreams, what makes you laugh. I want to fall in love with you all over again. You never fell in love with me the first time. Then I want to fall in love with you for the first time, and the second, and every day after." Elara smiled, feeling warmth spread through her chest. "That sounds perfect." He kissed her forehead, then her cheeks, then finally her lips. A soft, tender kiss that promised everything they'd been denied for 7 years. When they pulled apart, Rowan kept his arms around her, holding her close. "I have something for you," he said quietly. "What?" He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Inside was a ring, a simple band of gold set with a single sapphire, the deep blue of a winter sky. "This was my grandmother's," Rowan said. "She was the strongest woman I ever knew. She ran Greystone for 40 years, survived 2 wars, outlived 3 husbands, and never once backed down from a fight." He looked at Elara. "She would have loved you." Elara's throat tightened as he slipped the ring onto her finger beside her wedding band. "You already have a Duchess's ring," Rowan said. "This is different. This is a promise that I will never take you for granted again, that I will stand beside you, not above you or apart from you, that we are partners in everything." "Rowan, I love you, Elara Blackmore, and I'm asking you now, 7 years late, if you'll truly be my wife, not out of duty or contract, but because you choose to be." Elara looked at the ring, then at Rowan's face, open, vulnerable, hopeful in a way she'd never seen before, and she realized that this was the moment she'd been waiting for. Not the wedding 7 years ago, not the inquest verdict, but this, the moment when they chose each other freely. "Yes," she said, her voice breaking with emotion. "Yes, I choose you. I choose us." Rowan pulled her into his arms and kissed her deeply, and Elara felt something shift inside her. Not just happiness, but wholeness. She had spent 7 years as half a person, half a marriage, half a life. But now, finally, she was whole. They were whole. And nothing, not scandal, not society, not ghosts from the past, could change that. Later that night, as they lay together in Rowan's bed, their bed now, truly theirs, Elara traced patterns on his chest, her mind still processing everything that had happened. "What are you thinking?" Rowan murmured, his fingers running through her hair. "I'm thinking that Vivian was right about one thing." He tensed. "What?" "She said I was nothing, a nobody, a placeholder." Elara propped herself up on one elbow to look at him. "And she was right. I was all of those things. But not because of my birth or my family's lack of fortune. I was nothing because I accepted being nothing. I let myself disappear because it was easier than fighting. Elara, but I'm not nothing anymore, she continued. I'm the Duchess of Blackmore. Not because I married you, but because I earned it. I fought for it. I claimed it as mine. Rowan cupped her face in his hands. You were never nothing. I was just too blind to see what was right in front of me. Then we were both blind. But we see each other now. Yes, he agreed. We do. They held each other in the darkness, listening to the wind howl across the moors, and Elara felt a peace she'd never known before. She had spent 7 years in winter, frozen and alone. But spring had finally come, and with it, the promise of life, growth, and a future brighter than anything she'd dared to dream. She was home. Not because of the walls around her or the title attached to her name, but because of the man beside her and the strength she'd found within herself. She was home, and she would never be invisible again. Spring came to Greystone 6 weeks later, tentative at first, then with gathering strength. The snow melted from the moors, revealing patches of green beneath. Crocuses pushed through the frozen earth, their purple and yellow heads bright against the dark soil. The wind that had howled through the winter months softened, carrying the scent of growing things instead of ice and desolation. Elara stood at the same library window where she'd watched the first snowfall months ago, but everything had changed. The woman reflected in the glass was different, stronger, brighter, alive in a way she hadn't been since her wedding day. Behind her, Rowan sat at his desk, reviewing estate reports. But every few minutes, his gaze would drift to her, and she would catch him watching with an expression that still made her heart skip. Love. Real, earned, chosen love. The tenants are asking to meet with you, Rowan said, breaking the comfortable silence. Elara turned from the window. With me? Not you? Both of us, but they specifically requested your presence. He smiled slightly. It seems word has spread about what happened. They want to hear the story from you directly. Elara felt a flutter of nervousness. What should I tell them? The truth. You're rather good at that. She crossed to his desk and perched on the edge, close enough that their knees touched. They'll judge me, some of them. Some of them will. Others will respect you for surviving, for fighting back. Rowan took her hand. You can't control how people react to you, Elara. You can only control who you are, and who you are is remarkable. Remarkable, she repeated, testing the word. It felt foreign on her tongue, but less so than it would have weeks ago. Extraordinary, formidable, mine. He pulled her down into his lap, and she went willingly, laughing as she settled against him. Definitely mine. Possessive. Absolutely. She kissed him, soft and sweet, then pulled back. When is the meeting? Tomorrow afternoon, in the village hall. Tomorrow. Not much time to prepare. But then again, she'd spent 7 years preparing. She just hadn't known it. Matish. The village hall was packed. Elara stood at the entrance with Rowan, staring at the sea of faces, farmers and blacksmiths, shopkeepers and laborers, their wives and children. Easily 100 people, maybe more, all crammed into the small space, all waiting to see her. She felt Rowan's hand at the small of her back, steady and reassuring. Ready? He murmured. No, but let's do it anyway. They walked down the center aisle together, and the crowd parted to let them through. Elara could feel every eye on her, assessing, judging, measuring. At the front of the hall, a small platform had been erected. They climbed up together, and Rowan raised his hand for silence. Thank you all for coming, he said, his voice carrying easily across the crowd. I know there have been questions, rumors, uncertainty about what happened at Greystone. My wife and I are here to answer those questions honestly. A murmur ran through the crowd. An older man in the front row stood. Is it true, Your Grace, that Lady Vivian tried to kill you both? Rowan's expression remained steady. It's true. Lady Vivian Hargrave was responsible for multiple murders, including that of her late husband, Baron Hargrave. She came to Greystone with the intention of murdering me and claiming my fortune. Gasps echoed through the hall. And the Duchess? A woman called out. What's her part in all this? All eyes turned to Elara. She stepped forward, her heart pounding, but her voice steady. Lady Vivian saw me as an obstacle, Elara said clearly. She believed I was weak, insignificant, someone who could be easily removed. She was wrong. You killed her, someone shouted from the back. No, Elara said firmly. She killed herself. She chose to drink poison rather than face justice for her crimes. I tried to stop her, but she made her choice. Convenient story, the same voice sneered. Elara's hands clenched at her sides, but she kept her expression calm. The inquest examined all the evidence. 12 men of good standing reviewed the facts and found me innocent of any wrongdoing. If you doubt their verdict, you're welcome to review the public record yourself. The crowd murmured, some nodding, others still skeptical. An elderly woman in a worn shawl stood slowly. I knew your mother, Your Grace. Elara's breath caught. She hadn't expected anyone here to know her family. Did you? Aye. Good woman she was, kind to everyone no matter their station. You have her eyes. The woman studied Elara carefully. You have her steel too, I reckon. She would have been proud of how you handled yourself. Tears pricked Elara's eyes. Thank you. Another man stood, younger, with calloused hands and a farmer's build. What does this mean for us, Your Grace? For the estate? Will things change? Rowan started to answer, but Elara spoke first. Things will change, she said, but not in the way you fear. The Duke and I are partners now, truly partners. We'll be making decisions together, managing the estate together, ensuring the prosperity and well-being of everyone who lives and works here. You have my word. A woman's word, someone muttered. Elara's eyes flashed. Yes, a woman's word. The word of someone who fought off a murderer to protect this estate and everyone in it. The word of someone who has lived here for 7 years, learning every detail of how Greystone operates, caring for this land and these people, even when no one noticed or cared. So yes, my word, and it's worth just as much as any man's. The silence that followed was profound. Then the elderly woman who'd known Elara's mother began to clap. Slowly, others joined in. Not everyone. There were still skeptical faces, still people who looked away or frowned. But enough. More than half the crowd was applauding, some standing, some nodding in approval. Elara felt something warm and powerful swell in her chest. This was acceptance. Not universal, not unanimous, but real. She had earned it. A middle-aged woman with flour-dusted hands stepped forward. Your Grace, I have a question. A real one, not meant to challenge. Please, Elara said. My daughter, she's 12 now. Smart as a whip, can read better than her father. But there's no school here, no way for her to learn more. What chance does she have? Elara looked at the woman, seeing the hope and desperation in her eyes, seeing her own mother's face reflected there, a woman who had wanted more for her daughter than circumstances allowed. What's your daughter's name? Margaret, Your Grace. Margaret, Elara repeated. And you're right, there should be a school. There should be opportunities for children like Margaret to learn, to grow, to become more than their parents' circumstances allow. She looked out at the crowd. The Duke and I will establish a school here in the village, free for all children who wish to attend. We'll hire a proper teacher, provide books and supplies. It won't happen overnight, but it will happen. You have my word on that too. The woman's eyes filled with tears. Thank you, Your Grace. Thank you. More questions came then, about crop rotations and irrigation, about repair work needed on tenant cottages, about market prices and livestock. Elara answered what she could, deferred to Rowan when appropriate, and promised to investigate matters she didn't yet understand. By the time the meeting ended, 2 hours had passed. Elara was exhausted but exhilarated. As the crowd filed out, the old farmer who'd spoken early approached them. Your Grace, he said to Elara, I wanted to apologize. I was one of the ones saying you'd killed Lady Vivian out of jealousy. I was wrong. You're a good woman, and we're lucky to have you. Elara extended her hand, and after a moment of surprise, he shook it. Thank you, she said simply. That means more than you know. After he left, Elara had to step outside into the cool evening air, pressing her hands to her face, overwhelmed by the enormity of it all. Rowan found her there moments later. Are you all right? I don't know. I feel strange, like I'm not quite real. He pulled her close. You're very real, and you were magnificent in there. Was I? I felt like I was floundering. You spoke from the heart. You told them the truth. And most of them believed you. He kissed the top of her head. That's all you can do, Elara. Be yourself. The rest will follow. She leaned into him, drawing strength from his solid presence. Some of them will never accept me. No, they won't. But their children will. And their children's children. You're building something here, Elara. A legacy. It doesn't happen overnight. A legacy. The word resonated deep in her bones. She had never thought of herself as someone who would leave a mark on the world, but perhaps she could. Perhaps she already was. 2 weeks later, an invitation arrived from London. Elara stared at the heavy cream envelope, recognizing the seal immediately. The Duchess of Pembroke, one of the most influential women in English society. What does it say? Rowan asked, watching her face. Elara broke the seal and read aloud. Dear Duchess of Blackmore, I have heard remarkable things about your courage and character. I would be honored if you would join me for tea at Pembroke House next month. I believe we have much to discuss regarding the advancement of women's education and property rights. Your perspective would be invaluable. She signed it, with great respect. Rowan's eyebrows rose. The Duchess of Pembroke is one of the most powerful women in England. An invitation from her is practically a royal summons. She wants to discuss women's rights with me. Apparently your story has made you something of a figure. A woman who stood up to a murderer and won. A duchess who defied expectations and survived. He smiled. You're becoming influential, Elara. The idea was dizzying. I don't know anything about politics or reform. You know what it's like to be underestimated, to be dismissed as insignificant, to fight for your place in a world that doesn't value women. Rowan took her hands. That's exactly the perspective she needs. Elara read the letter again, her mind racing with possibilities. Maybe she could do more than just survive. Maybe she could help others do the same. I'll go, she said decisively. Will you come with me? Wouldn't miss it. The month passed in a blur of activity. Spring settled fully into Greystone, transforming the estate into something beautiful and alive. The gardens bloomed with tulips and daffodils. The orchards burst into clouds of white and pink blossoms, and the moors turned a vibrant green that seemed to stretch forever. Elara threw herself into estate management with renewed energy. She met with the tenants regularly, listening to their concerns, implementing improvements. She worked with Rowan to design the school building, choosing a site near the village center with good light and space for a small playground. She also began writing, tentatively at first, then with growing confidence. Letters to her brother, now reconciled after years of distance. A journal documenting her experiences. And then, at Rowan's encouragement, an essay about women's strength and survival. You should publish this, Rowan said after reading it. Publish it? Where? There are magazines, journals, publications that would be interested in a duchess's perspective on these matters. The idea terrified her. What if people mock it? What if they say I'm overstepping? Then they say it. But some people will read it and see themselves in your words. Some woman somewhere will feel less alone because you had the courage to speak. He squeezed her hand. Isn't that worth the risk? She thought about it, about all the years she'd been silent, invisible, afraid to take up space. Yes, she said finally. It is. London was overwhelming. The noise, the crowds, the endless parade of carriages and vendors and street performers. It assaulted Elara's senses after months in the quiet countryside. But Pembroke House was an oasis of elegance in the chaos. The Duchess of Pembroke received them in a drawing room filled with afternoon light, her silver hair perfectly coiffed, her intelligent eyes sharp and assessing. Duchess Blackmore, she said warmly, rising to greet them. I'm so pleased you could come. And Duke Blackmore, always a pleasure. Rowan bowed over her hand. The pleasure is ours, Your Grace. They settled into comfortable chairs, and tea was served with delicate pastries and finger sandwiches. The Duchess of Pembroke studied Elara with undisguised curiosity. I've heard quite a bit about you, my dear. The Duchess who faced down a murderer. It's caused quite a stir in society. I'm sure it has, Elara said carefully. Some are calling you reckless. Others are calling you brave. A few particularly uncharitable souls are calling you calculating. The Duchess smiled. I think you're brilliant. Elara blinked. I'm sorry? You did what women have been unable to do for centuries. You defended yourself. You survived, and you made sure the world knew the truth. You didn't hide in shame or defer to men to save you. You saved yourself. The Duchess leaned forward. That's revolutionary, my dear. I didn't mean to be revolutionary. I just wanted to live. The best revolutions start that way. The Duchess poured more tea. I've been working for years to advance the cause of women's rights, property ownership, education, legal protections. But it's difficult to make people care about abstract concepts. They need stories. Real women doing extraordinary things. She looked at Elara meaningfully. They need you. Elara felt the weight of expectation settle on her shoulders. I'm not sure I'm the right person for this. I'm not educated or eloquent or... You're authentic, the Duchess interrupted. You're a woman who lived through hell and came out stronger. Women will listen to you because you're one of them, not some untouchable aristocrat who's never known hardship. I am an aristocrat. By marriage, not birth. And everyone knows it. That's your strength, Elara. You understand both worlds. Rowan spoke up quietly. What exactly are you asking my wife to do? The Duchess's smile was sharp. I'm asking her to tell her story, publicly, to speak at gatherings, to write about her experiences, to become a voice for women who have no voice of their own. Elara's heart raced. I need to think about this. Of course. Take all the time you need. The Duchess handed Elara a card. But know this, you have already changed things simply by surviving. The question is whether you want to be part of shaping what comes next. They spent another hour discussing the Duchess's work, the schools she'd founded, the legislation she was lobbying for, the network of influential women she'd assembled. It was inspiring and intimidating in equal measure. As they prepared to leave, the Duchess pulled Elara aside. I know this is frightening, she said quietly. Speaking publicly, making yourself vulnerable to criticism. But you've already survived the worst that society can throw at you. You stood trial in the court of public opinion and won. Everything after this will be easier. Will it? Well, perhaps not easier, but you'll be stronger for it. The Duchess smiled. Think about my offer, and remember, courage isn't the absence of fear, it's acting despite it. That night, Elara and Rowan walked through Hyde Park as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose. What are you thinking? Rowan asked. I'm thinking that a year ago I was invisible, a ghost in my own home, and now the Duchess of Pembroke wants me to become some kind of public figure. It's absurd. Is it? You've already proven you can handle scrutiny. You faced down a murderer, testified at an inquest, won over skeptical tenants. Why not take it further? Because I'm afraid, Elara admitted. What if I fail? What if I say the wrong thing or make a fool of myself? What if I make things worse instead of better? Rowan stopped walking and turned to face her. Then you'll fail, and you'll get back up and try again. That's what you do, Elara. You survive, you adapt, you overcome. You make it sound easy. It's not easy. It's terrifying. But so was confronting Vivian, and you did that. He took her hands. I can't tell you what to do. This has to be your choice. But I will tell you this. Whatever you decide, I'll be beside you, supporting you, believing in you. Elara looked at their joined hands, then up at his face. This man who had been a stranger for 7 years and was now her partner, her love, her anchor. I want to do it, she said quietly. I want to try. Not because I think I'm special or important, but because maybe my story can help someone else feel less alone, less powerless. Rowan smiled, pride shining in his eyes. Then we'll do it together. Together, Elara echoed. And in that moment, standing in the fading light with the man she loved, Elara felt something shift inside her one final time. She was no longer the invisible Duchess, desperate for scraps of affection. She was no longer the frightened woman hiding in the shadows, hoping not to be noticed. She was Elara Blackmore, Duchess of Greystone. Survivor, fighter, voice for the voiceless. And she was just getting started. 6 months later, Elara stood before a crowded assembly hall in Manchester, looking out at hundreds of faces, mostly women, but some men too, all waiting to hear her speak. Her hands trembled slightly as she gripped the podium, but her voice was strong. 7 years ago, I married a man who didn't love me. I became a duchess in name only, powerless, invisible, insignificant. For 7 years, I accepted that fate. I told myself it was enough to simply exist, to fulfill my duties, to stay out of the way. The crowd was silent, hanging on every word. But last winter, I learned something important. I learned that invisibility is not safety, that silence is not peace, that accepting less than you deserve doesn't protect you, it destroys you. She paused, gathering her thoughts. A woman came to my home intent on murder. She believed I was weak, that I could be easily removed, and she was almost right. Because for 7 years, I had made myself weak by refusing to claim my own power. Elara's voice grew stronger. But when she threatened everything I had worked for, everything I had built, I made a choice. I chose to fight. I chose to survive. I chose to be seen. She looked out at the sea of faces, seeing her own story reflected in their eyes. Women who had been dismissed, overlooked, underestimated. We are told that our value lies in our beauty, our obedience, our ability to make ourselves small. We are told that power is masculine, that strength is unfeminine, that fighting back is unladylike. Her voice rang out clear and fierce. But I am here to tell you that we are stronger than they know, that we can survive things they cannot imagine, that we have the right to take up space, to demand respect, to refuse to disappear. The crowd began to murmur, energy building. I am not special, Elara continued. I am not extraordinary. I am simply a woman who refused to accept that invisibility was my destiny. And if I can do it, so can you. Every one of you has that same strength inside you. The question is whether you'll use it. She gripped the podium tighter. So I ask you, will you stay silent? Will you make yourself small? Will you accept less than you deserve? She paused, letting the question hang in the air. Or will you fight? Will you demand to be seen? Will you claim the power that has always been yours? The room erupted. Women stood, cheering, some crying, all energized by words that gave voice to feelings they'd carried for years. Elara stepped back from the podium, her heart pounding, and felt Rowan's hand find hers in the crowd behind the stage. Well done, he murmured. She turned to him, tears streaming down her face. Did I do all right? You were perfect. And looking out at the crowd of women who had found their voices, Elara believed him. After the speech, women approached her, dozens of them, each with a story. A widow fighting for her late husband's property. A young woman denied education by her father. A mother desperate to protect her daughters from the same powerlessness she'd endured. Elara listened to each one, offering what comfort and advice she could. Some she connected with the Duchess of Pembroke's network. Others she simply held, letting them cry on her shoulder, giving them the validation of being heard. By the time the hall emptied, she was exhausted. But it was a good exhaustion, the kind that came from meaningful work. You're making a difference, Rowan said as they rode back to their lodgings. Am I? Or am I just giving them false hope? You're giving them something more valuable than hope. You're giving them proof that change is possible, that survival is possible, that they're not alone. Elara leaned against him, letting his strength support her. This is harder than I expected. Most worthwhile things are, but also more rewarding. Yes, he agreed. That too. They returned to Greystone as summer reached its peak, the estate golden with wheat and warm with sunshine. The school had been completed in their absence, a sturdy stone building with large windows and a small bell tower. Margaret, the flower-dusted woman's daughter, was one of the first students enrolled, along with 20 others ranging from 6 to 14 years old. Elara visited on the first day of classes, watching through the windows as the teacher, a young woman from London with progressive ideas about education, engaged the children in a lively discussion about geography. They're learning, Mrs. Halloway said, appearing beside her. Really learning, not just memorizing, but thinking. Good, Elara said. That's exactly what I hoped for. The housekeeper studied her. You've changed, Your Grace. Not just in how you look, but in how you carry yourself. You're bigger somehow. Like you take up more space. Elara smiled. I do take up more space. I've stopped trying to make myself small. It suits you. That evening, Elara found Rowan in the library, reading correspondence. She settled into the chair across from him, content to simply be in his presence. There's something I need to tell you, she said after a moment. He looked up, concerned. What is it? I'm pregnant. The words hung in the air between them. Rowan's expression transformed, shock, then joy, then something deeper and more tender. Are you certain? The doctor confirmed it yesterday in London. I wanted to wait until we were home to tell you. He crossed to her and knelt beside her chair, taking her hands in his. How do you feel? Terrified, excited, overwhelmed. She smiled. Happy. I'm happy too, he said, his voice thick with emotion. So incredibly happy. He pulled her into his arms, and they held each other, both marveling at the miracle of new life growing between them. What kind of mother do you think I'll be? Elara asked quietly. The best kind. Strong, loving, fierce in protecting your child. Rowan pulled back to look at her. Our child will be so lucky to have you. Our child will have both of us, Elara corrected. We're partners in this too. Yes, he agreed. Partners in everything. Duchess. The months passed in a blur of preparation and anticipation. Elara continued her speaking engagements, though less frequently as her pregnancy advanced. She wrote more, contributing essays to progressive magazines about women's rights, education, and social reform. And she planned for the future, not just for her child, but for the estate, for the tenants, for the legacy she wanted to build. Winter returned to Greystone, but it was different this time. The house was warm with love and laughter. Rowan's coldness had thawed completely, replaced by tenderness and devotion. The servants moved with purpose and pride, knowing their work mattered. And Elara, standing once more at the library window watching snow fall on the moors, felt a peace she'd never known. She was no longer invisible. She was no longer nothing. She was a duchess, a speaker, a writer, a soon-to-be mother. She was powerful in ways she'd never imagined. And it had all started with one simple decision: to fight instead of disappear. In late February, on a night when the wind howled and snow fell thick and fast, Elara gave birth to a daughter. The labor was long and difficult, but she endured it with the same strength she'd shown facing Vivian. Rowan stayed with her the entire time, holding her hand, encouraging her, refusing to leave even when the midwife suggested he wait elsewhere. And when their daughter finally arrived, squalling and red-faced and perfect, Elara held her and wept. She's beautiful, Rowan whispered, his own eyes wet with tears. She's ours, Elara said. They named her Grace, after Rowan's grandmother who had ruled Greystone with wisdom and strength for 40 years. Grace Whitcomb Blackmore, future Duchess of Greystone. As Elara cradled her daughter, watching Rowan's face transform with love and wonder, she thought about everything that had led to this moment. The frozen years, the silence, the loneliness, Vivian's return, the confrontation, the fight for survival, the inquest, the public scrutiny, the choice to speak out. All of it had been necessary. All of it had shaped her into the woman she was now, strong enough to be a mother, confident enough to be a leader, courageous enough to change the world. What are you thinking? Rowan asked, stroking Grace's tiny hand. I'm thinking about what I'll tell her someday, Elara said. About her mother's story. What will you say? Elara looked down at her daughter's sleeping face. I'll tell her that her mother was once invisible, that she lived in a frozen house with a frozen heart, convinced she had no power, no voice, no value. And then? And then I'll tell her that her mother learned the truth, that power isn't given, it's claimed, that voices aren't granted, they're raised, that value doesn't come from others, it comes from within. Elara looked up at Rowan. I'll tell her that her mother fought a monster and won. Not with violence, but with courage and truth and stubborn refusal to disappear. Rowan kissed her forehead. She'll be proud of you. I hope so. But more than that, I hope she never has to fight the way I did. I hope she grows up knowing her worth, claiming her power, refusing to make herself small for anyone. She will, because she'll have you as an example. Grace stirred in Elara's arms, tiny fists waving, and Elara felt her heart swell with a love so fierce it almost hurt. This child would never be invisible. She would never doubt her value. She would never accept less than she deserved, because Elara would make sure of it. She would tell her daughter the truth, that women were not meant to be ornaments or shadows or silent partners. They were meant to be seen, heard, valued, and if the world tried to make her small, she would fight back. Just like her mother had. Just like her mother would teach her. Spring returned again, as it always did. Elara stood in the gardens with Grace in her arms, now 3 months old and already showing signs of her mother's determination and her father's intensity. Rowan appeared beside them, sliding his arm around Elara's waist. "The school enrollment has doubled," he said. "We'll need to hire another teacher." "Good. Let's hire 2. And start planning an expansion." He smiled, always thinking ahead. "Someone has to." They stood together, watching the gardens bloom, and Elara marveled at how far they'd come. From frozen strangers to devoted partners. From duty to love. From survival to thriving. The journey had been brutal, the cost had been high, but standing here now, in Rowan's arms, holding their daughter, surrounded by life and growth and possibility, Elara knew it had been worth it. Every frozen year, every silent dinner, every lonely night, all of it had led to this moment, to this life, to this love. "I have something for you," Rowan said suddenly. He pulled a folded paper from his pocket and handed it to her. Elara opened it carefully, her eyes scanning the words. It was the deed to Greystone, newly drawn up, listing both their names as equal owners. "Rowan, you've always been my partner," he said. "Now it's official, legal, permanent. Greystone belongs to both of us equally." Elara felt tears stream down her cheeks. I don't know what to say. "Say you'll keep being exactly who you are. Strong, fearless, unstoppable." She kissed him then, deep and long, their daughter nestled between them. And as they stood there in the gardens of Greystone, surrounded by new life and endless possibility, Elara felt something profound settle in her soul. She was home. Not because of the walls around her or the title attached to her name, but because of the man beside her and the strength she'd found within herself. She was home, and she would never be invisible again. The moors stretched endlessly before them, wild and beautiful and free, just like she was. Finally, after all these years, she was free. The ghost was gone, and in her place stood a Duchess, a mother, a voice for the voiceless, a woman who had claimed her power and would never let it go. Elara Blackmore had survived the winter, and now standing in the spring sunshine with her family, with her purpose, with her hard-won freedom, she was ready for whatever came next. Because she knew the truth now. She was not nothing. She never had been. She had always been extraordinary. She had just needed to believe it. And now she did.